Hey, it's Steven Parado, aka Stevie P, the host of the Conscious Creative Tribe. And today I just wanted to record a video on a hot topic, but it's really a revolutionary topic. And that topic is Bitcoin and cryptocurrency because it's trending, people are talking about it, blah, blah, blah. It's getting a lot of hype. But I also want to talk about the implications of this because it really is going to change so much of our lives and the world we live in. So if you're not familiar what it is, Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, blockchain, all these esoteric terms that people toss around, I'll give you a quick rundown. So here's a quick cryptocurrency 101, if you will, with the terminology and then the use cases and the applications of this stuff, because that's the most exciting part to me, is how this applies and how it's going to change so many different things about the way we interact with each other and the possibilities we have available to us. Because I really think this is a mechanism, a medium for us to catalyze the change that we've envisioned. So many of us have these visions, these goals, these dreams. But a lot of times we have these things that stand in our way that prevent us from accomplishing them and bringing them to fruition. And along with limiting beliefs, another very limiting factor has been money and the monetary system, fiat currency. And this seriously is going to level the playing field. Cryptocurrency, it's in the process of leveling the playing field and allowing people to tap into this wealth and giving you the opportunity to redistribute and apply that wealth however you want. So we have the opportunity to do a lot with this and to bring those world-changing things to fruition, to actualize positive change on a more effective, on a bigger scale. All right, so what is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is a digital currency. Andreas Antonopoulos called it the Internet of Money. So it's a decentralized way of communicating value between two people. And it's done digitally. So that's the basics of that. I don't want to confuse you or go too deep. That's the basics of it. The Internet of Money, digital currency, communicating value digitally. All right. And then cryptocurrency is the Wikipedia definition is something along the lines of a digital asset that is designed to work as a medium of exchange. So again, digital medium of exchange that has an agreed upon value. And then people want to say, oh, it's not backed by anything, blah, blah, blah. Like what is fiat currency backed by? Nothing now. And even if you want to go into like gold, what is gold backed by? Yes, it's a physical thing, but it's just backed by an agreement. And everything we do as humans, it's a collective consensus, essentially. So now we have the opportunity to instantaneously exchange value digitally, you know? So nothing's really backed by anything. It's just this is all stories we tell ourselves. There is no United States of America. That's just a story that we've created as a collective, you know? So everything is a story. Everything is this collective consensus that we've come to. So that's my response to what is it backed by, all that stuff. And I'll get into the limited circulation because that prevents inflation, because inflation is a big problem. That's why, we have so much debt. That's why fiat currency is basically worthless, because but centralized institutions keep printing more and more, therefore deflating the value. It's less valuable because they're printing so much of it, unlimited basically. All right, and then so there are many cryptocurrencies. It's more than just Bitcoin, way more than just Bitcoin. And then let's get into blockchain. So blockchain is the underlying logic that Bitcoin is based on. So Bitcoin has its own blockchain that it's built upon. So does Ethereum, which is another cryptocurrency. So blockchain, it's defined as like a continuously growing list of records, and these records are called blocks. and these blocks get linked and secured using cryptography. So cryptography is secret encryption. So it's blockchains. So every record is a block in the chain, and it all gets chained together. And a cool analogy, metaphor that I've heard to describe a blockchain is a fly being stuck in amber. So the initial transaction, whatever, the initial exchange of value, let's just say transaction, is like when a fly gets stuck in the amber. And then let's say, just for an example, every 10 years, I know this isn't accurate, but whatever, every 10 years, another layer of amber forms around that fly. So every layer of amber would be a block, and it's all together in a chain. And so the longer it grows, the harder it is to change it. And that's also why it's so hard to hack. Like, no one's ever hacked the blockchain that Bitcoin's based on. The only hacks have been to like exchanges. So part of the reason why it's so hard to hack is you have to, first of all, hack into it, which is very hard in and of itself. But when you do, the chain is still going on. So even if you do hack the chain, it's continuing forward. So then you have to outpace that chain that's continuing forward, which is virtually impossible. So that's why it's so hard to hack this, because that hacked version will automatically become invalid, because when transactions happen, it goes out on the Bitcoin network, it goes out to everyone. So it's a ledger that everyone sees. So everyone will see that ledger continuing, and then the hacked one will be behind. So it won't catch up. I don't want to get too into the details, because you can get lost in the weeds, but I want to go more into the applications of this stuff. So with blockchain technology, you don't need a third-party centralized institution to approve or regulate transactions. And that's what we have with fiat currency and with a lot of things like legal contracts and all that. So let's say I buy something from a vendor. I buy an apple from a market and I use a credit card. That goes from me. It gets approved by JP Morgan, my bank, whatever. That it gets approved by their company, their bank. So it has to go through all of these central institutions to have a peer-to-peer transaction. And then cryptocurrency, blockchain, enables me to send you value peer-to-peer without having to go through a central institution. Because the problem with centralized institutions is you have an accumulation of power, and that's a ripe opportunity for corruption, manipulation, all that, because when you have so much power. And that's what we see with the fiat currency system. A small group of individuals hold so much wealth, and they are preventing the majority of the world from tapping into wealth. That's why there's so much poverty, and even the middle class is shrinking in America, blah, blah, blah. But everyone can agree that in terms of fiat currency, it's been centralized and manipulated. So this takes away that. It decentralizes. And when you have decentralization, it makes it a more secure network too. Because right now, if someone hacked Bank of America, you have access to millions of people's information and all that stuff, because it's a central honeypot. If everything's decentralized, how are you going to break or kill a decentralized network? It's like a starfish versus a spider. I've heard this metaphor. So with a spider, if you hack off one leg, it limps, and another leg, it limps more, and if you cut off its head, it's dead. But a starfish, on the other hand, if you hack off a leg, it grows a new one. If you cut it in the middle, it becomes a whole new starfish. So that's what decentralization is. You can't kill it or control it or anything. It's a network. And this mimics, I don't want to go too deep into the esoteric macro micro scale of things, but that's how our brains work. That's how the internet's working. It's all a democratized system, so it mimics the universe. And that's a deep rabbit hole. But also, Another application is trust. So it allows you to send private transactions, because another thing with fiat currency is all these companies, these big companies, have everyone's information. And while this doesn't seem like a problem if you're in like America right now, but if you're under a tyrannical institution of any type, what if this is the case? If you send the money to a wrong company or institution or whatever, something that dictatorship or that government thinks is wrong, they could shut down your account and you're labeled as a terrorist or whatever. So privacy is a way to not be under the thumb of tyrannical institutions. So more freedom and all that. And then also global connectivity is a big application of this as well, because we have national currencies right now. And they're based upon these, like I said before, all nations are stories. They're arbitrary boundaries that we've created. So cryptocurrency opens us up to a global network, because there's so many headaches that come with sending money anywhere else in the world. Like a big use case is some of the poorest people in the world, immigrants, sending money to their families. So let's say someone from Honduras lives in the US and they're making money and sending it back to their family. Right now they have to, like, this isn't even counting like having to convert the currencies and all that stuff, but they have to go through an institution like Western Union, which takes like 10% away from, these are some of the poorest people in the world, and Western Union's taking 10% from them. That's a really fucked up situation, and this is what happens when you have centralized power. It allows people to just whatever. It allows these central institutions to become giant parasites, essentially. So with cryptocurrency, that person could send money to their family, could send currency, wealth to their family instantaneously with very, very small transaction costs. So that's a big game changer right there. And then, what's another thing I wanted to get into? Comparing Bitcoin to gold. So you could think of, here's another analogy, metaphor. You can think of Bitcoin as something like digital gold. So it's not like going to be a completely accurate comparison, not 100%, because it's not gold. But in basically three ways. So one way, and this is the biggest one, is there's a limited supply. And that's what creates that perceived value. Remember, all value is perceived value. So having a limited supply makes it valuable. So gold has a limited supply, obviously, because it's a physical good. But Bitcoin, it's in the inherent logic that only 21 million will be created. So there's a finite supply. And because there's a finite supply, it holds value and it can't be inflated. Like I said, with fiat currency, they're printing more and more and more. It loses value. If there's trillions, hundreds of trillions, its value goes down. If they can print on demand, its value goes down. That's what happened in Germany in 1918. Overinflation, hyperinflation, whatever the actual term is, hyperinflation, where you get to the point where your millions in the bank are worthless because they printed so much, and you have to buy a loaf of bread with a wheelbarrow full of money, like crazy stuff like that. And that doesn't happen when you have a medium of exchange that is finite. So in addition to that, it's a store of value. So even though it's digital, it's a store of value. It serves that same purpose that gold does. And also, and this just comes with the territory, it's an alternative to fiat currency. So traditionally, people have put money into gold and silver as an alternative to fiat currency or their nation's currency. So it gives us another option. And it's good to have another option right now, because the more you study fiat currency, the less enthused you become about it, at least in my opinion, and the opinion of many others and experts. But Bitcoin has advantages over gold, so that's what makes it even more exciting. So one of those advantages is it's basically infinitely divisible. So you can send 0.001 Bitcoin to someone. Like, it's really hard to do that with gold. Like, what do? Like, chip off a sliver and mail it, and how do you measure it? Like, you can't really divide up gold like that and sell it that way. And then there's also the instantaneous factor. So with anything physical, you can't really send it instantaneously, but with a digital currency, you can send it anywhere in the world instantaneously. So those are two advantages. And then I also wanted to get into Ethereum. You've probably heard that term before. You've probably heard of that cryptocurrency before. It's basically the second largest cryptocurrency. And in addition to being an actual currency that people can trade and use to buy things and in exchange of value, it's having a wider use, I guess, than Bitcoin. So it's being used for a lot of smart contracts. So let's say like legal contracts. They're using Ethereum's blockchain. And then a lot of companies are actually being built on top of Ethereum's blockchain as well. So it's supporting a whole ecosystem. So this isn't just a coin. It's not just a currency. It's becoming a whole ecosystem, which is pretty amazing. And there are so many different cryptocurrencies as well coming out, like thousands. And a lot of them are going to be trash because this is the wild, wild west. People are just coming into the space. People that are more adept with technology are scamming people, all that. But that's going to self-correct as people get more knowledgeable, more responsible, and they know what to watch for, essentially. But right now, you get a lot of that happening. But that doesn't mean there aren't some great altcoins, they're called. And altcoins are basically any other cryptocurrency besides Bitcoin and Ethereum. So there's a lot of good ones out there if you do your research. Things like Neo, EOS, Stellar, OMG, things like that. And this brings me to another point that I want to talk about, and that's sovereignty. So I said, like, you have to do your own research. You have to be responsible. We're being called to sovereignty at this point of his story. At this point of our development as humans, whatever you want to call it, in terms of the big picture. Everything's becoming democratized. We no longer have a need for these central institutions. All right, so we no longer need religious figures to tell us how to get in touch with our spirituality. We no longer need political figures to tell us how to act. We no longer need banks to hold our money and all that stuff. So we have the opportunity to democratize everything, and that's actually what's happening. That's the macro flow of our state of humanity, whatever. So that's where everything is headed, and you need to embrace sovereignty. All right, if you want to be someone who says yes to authority figures, and whatever the authority figure says, you say yes and you do it, that's fine. But honestly, that's outdated, and it's not going to work anymore. And those systems are breaking down. So you're being forced to be a sovereign being. So that means thinking for yourself, finding your spirituality for yourself, and holding your wealth yourself. Not putting it in the bank, but you are responsible for it. Like with cryptocurrency, you can have all of your cryptocurrency written as a passphrase on a piece of paper and stored. You can have it on a USB drive. You can have it stored on a desktop wallet. So you are in charge of it. It's yours. You're not having the bank store it. So sovereignty and responsibility. And this also applies to getting into the investing. So do your own research, and you have the ability to do that. You have the ability to find crazy opportunities. So you have to do your due diligence. Educate yourself. Talk to the right people. And then make an informed decision on your own and take full responsibility for your decision. Because if you're fully informed when you make a decision, you're not going to be scammed. You're only going to be scammed if you jump into something without knowing what you're doing. So sovereignty, personal responsibility, those are two big things that you have to embrace in this society. And it's a beautiful thing because that's freedom. Like, I don't want to live in a world where an authority figure tells me everything I have to do, because that's not freedom. And thankfully, we're heading towards that idea of sovereignty, responsibility, and democratization. And then the other thing I wanted to get into is like the long-term forecast of all this stuff, because the global monetary supply, this is how big it is. It's like $90 trillion. Trillion. And that's not even including debt. 90 trillion. So that's the global monetary supply. And cryptocurrency right now is like 175 billion. So let's just say cryptocurrency, it becomes 1% of the global money supply. So if it becomes 1%, it moves from 175 billion to 1 trillion. That's 6 times growth, about roughly. 6 times growth. And saying it will be 1% of the global monetary supply is as conservative as it gets, because I just laid out to you the advantages of this stuff. It's so much better in so many ways than fiat currency. And because of that, it's going to be a lot more than 1% of the global money supply. So that's a super conservative estimate, is everything is going to 6x. And let's get into more of a realistic estimate, I would say. And that's eventually it becomes like 25%. And I'm not saying this is going to happen in 5 years. Like, this is more long-term, 10, 20 years down the road. Let's say it becomes 25%. And I think long-term, actually, that's even being conservative too, because with all the advantages, this has the potential to completely render fiat currency useless. It has that potential. But let's just say 25%. If it becomes 25% of the global monetary supply, that is, I think it's 150 times growth. So it's going to grow 150x. That's crazy. So that means if you're holding any cryptocurrency right now, let's say you have $1,000, that $1,000 is going to become $150,000. And that's just average. All right, if you play it smart, it's going to be even more. But that's what we're looking at. That's the kind of growth we are looking at. And another point, the final point that I want to make with all this is like the hype and the money and all that, because a lot of people are jumping into it because of the profit potentials. But that's just going to be a downstream side effect, I would call it, because the real question that you have to ask yourself, because people will make, and if you get involved and you do some research, you will generate some wealth, like generational wealth. So the question is, what are you going to do with that wealth? Because this is the opportunity that we're working with. It's that big. What are you going to do with that wealth? So everything, the playing field is becoming leveled like never before. We have the opportunity to go into something and leave fiat currency behind. Therefore, leveling the playing field and decentralizing everything, redistributing wealth, and creating a new global society basically from the ground up. We can do things at the grassroots level because of that immense wealth redistribution that's happening. You got kids that are 23 years old that made millions already off of Bitcoin. Like, that's crazy. So because of this great redistribution happening globally, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to use that wealth to help people? Are you going to use that wealth to create some world-changing businesses or projects or anything, or nonprofit organizations? Or are you going to fund things like that? Are you going to fund world-changing projects? That's what you need to think about. Yeah, it's good for all the hype. Oh, I made 1,000, 100,000 here and there. But what are you going to do with it? How are you going to impact the world? That's where you have to get in touch with your vision. Because a lot of people, especially creative types, if you're a creative, idealistic type of person, you have these dreams. I know you do, because I do too. And this is your opportunity to generate wealth that could bring these dreams to fruition. As wild as your dreams are, you could bring any of it to fruition. So all these crazy ideas you have that you can help people and build this and implement that, that is possible right now. That's what we're getting at. That kind of opportunity exists right now to bring your wildest dreams to fruition and help people on a scale that has only been available to those in power. And now that power is being redistributed, so we have the power to impact the world and help people. And I want to end on that note. So what are you going to do with it? Get involved, do your research, step into your power as a sovereign being, and let's make a positive impact on the world. All right? Peace, peace, much love, and one love, baby.